This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. Whatever defines the results of your organization, the system that you have is what produces those results. You want better results, you need to change the system. And culture, it's overarching, it's an umbrella term for what the system is and what it produces.
This is one of my absolute favorite conversations, and let's be realistic, this is also how we met Adam Markel, right? Like, we go back, how many years are we at now?
More than 10, can we leave it at
that? Well, listen, when I was getting started in whatever business this is, you were one of the first people I sought out here in San Diego, because you're like, you did the pivot first. Like, I mean, it's pretty cool if you think about a lawyer who pivoted. Obviously, your first book is all about pivots. But like, when you think back to the Adam that had coffee together to the Adam that you are today with ReCulture, I'm curious, have you enjoyed the ride? What's changed for you?
Oh my God, that's such a big question to start with. I'm not sure if my caffeine.
You got your coffee?
No, I'll have to go grab another cup. I've enjoyed the ride immensely. And that said, I still wake up in the morning, and a part of my early morning practice is lately I use this particular terminology, but it's to remind myself to stay on the joy train. And when I fall off the joy train, or I get off consciously choose to get off the joy train, we can get into what that looks like too, but to get back on. And so, yeah, that's a really concise answer to that. I've loved the journey, and I wouldn't change anything on that journey either. And I'm really excited for what it is in this moment, and what the future will be.
I mean, you're a living case study of, you know what, if I don't like something, I am going to change it. Or if something is bothering me about this past life, the best metaphor I have for this is the rock that skips across the pond. You know, it's like, and you've done it multiple times here. So I'm curious with this, you know, this sort of pivot into ReCulture now. You got a new book coming out. And I adore the title. Like, I love the business. I feel like we are in the business. The sets you free is something I find myself saying on the regular. What we got to just figure out what the is for your org. So when I saw the title, it just made me smile, and I'm not surprised. Give me a little bit about what this even means from your perspective.
Yeah. So we noticed recently that, so we've had a couple of other books that I won't talk about. Like, I should mention them. Like, I had this book called the I Love My Life Challenge, and a book called Soul Over Matter that I did with somebody else that was really cool. A Qigong master, Tai Chi master, like somebody who was coming from a very different discipline and way of seeing the world. But the three sort of major books of this last 10-year period has started with Pivot, and then it went to Change Proof, which came was February of 2022, February 22nd, 2022, kind of coming out of the pandemic and looking at how you embrace change. So Pivot was very much this reinvention book. Change Proof was very much a book about resilience and how you leverage uncertainty and adversity and complexity and ambiguity, all the same things that we're dealing with right now. So very, very relevant still. And that the unsung hero in that story was resilience. To the current work that just was published officially June 16th, 2026. So 6/16.
Wow, congratulations.
Bunch of the same kind of numerology things going on, I guess. And in that journey, that book is about what did we lose and where are we headed in terms of business culture, in terms of how we relate to one another. So it's a business book, like Change Proof is a business book, and Pivot is both a business and a personal reinvention story. But now I started thinking about a few years ago, because that's the way books are, right? You are, and the way I explain it or say it to our team is, I want to think about skating to where the puck is gonna be, the way Gretzky used to, say that. So now everybody has heard that, but it really is very profound. And it's not trying to have a crystal ball or be a prognosticator or be Nostradamus. I mean, but it's like thinking about where are things headed? Are there sort of, can you see the breadcrumbs into the future? And so Pivot, when it came out, was very much, I think, a book that was before its time. People weren't ready to think about pivots, talk about pivots, embrace pivots. It was too negative. The idea of changing your life, changing your career path on purpose, or even when it's not by your choosing, but then you have to, then going from wherever that place is. So that was ahead, I think, of its time. And now I wish I had a dime for every time a person's used the word pivot. And Change Proof, I think we were literally skating to where the puck was headed. And we began writing that book around 2020 and researching and stuff. And then, we had a pandemic and everybody was dealing with prolific change, and still to this day, still dealing with all that uncertainty. And Reculture, we'll see if in hindsight, it turns out to be the same case. But a few years back, I was just thinking, the culture and the way that we related to one another pre-pandemic is very different than the way we relate to one another and how our businesses work and operate post-pandemic. And so this was a book to try to navigate that delta, identify it, if you will, and also use our research to provide some indicators, some forward-looking indicators of where things may be headed, and how we're going to work on it together. So the construction of the book, like in Change Proof, the construction is pause, ask, choose. That's sort of the overarching structural dynamic, and the convention in this book in Reculture is to work well together. These are the three kind of pillars that run through the book. Working well together is what we're after. So that's a little bit about that, and it was also funny just to see that Pivot, the inside of the the cover, when you take the cover off, the book is red, and then the book Change Proof, the inside of the cover is blue, and then in this one, in Reculture, which I just happen to have handy, when you take the flap off, the inside of the book is, the hardcover is white. Like, oh my goodness, look at that, it's red, white, and blue. How fun.
Yeah, why not the July 4th? You didn't want to kick it off on the 4th of July? No?
I know. They chose the 16th. It would have been, if we'd have recognized that was the case, maybe we would have been like cheesy
Maybe
enough.
there's a bundle.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bundle opportunity for the 4th of July. But I can't turn the marketing part of me off, right? So
don't ever do that. Yeah.
I love the Reculture, like just the idea of, when I think about it, well, it's kind of like word stock market, right? And like the word culture should have never been at stake. It should never have been something left to the wayside. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but Reculture certainly infers like, hey, it's time to like come back to this very important word. It's not like we need to double down. We need to invest in our culture. We need to invest in our people. We need to do it together. What I wonder from your perspective, and the lazy answer here is everybody. Okay, I'm going to say it now, but like, who is responsible? Whose job is it to build, steer, and lead culture? Like, who is actually accountable? Because I'm with you 100% that every culture right now, or every collection of humans that work at a company, because I don't think they get what culture actually is, needs this. So what are you seeing from your perspective? Like, who's the right person to read the book, and do they get it? Do they get how important this is?
Yeah, no, another awesome question, buddy. At the end of the book, and I won't give it away, there's a place where we are speaking directly to sort of mid-level leaders, managers, that sort of folks, or anybody that has a boss. Let's put it that way. Anybody that has a boss.
Yeah.
The call to action at the end of the book is, if this book meant something to you, if you got something as, leave this book on your boss's desk, right?
I love that.
Or and we say this a little cheeky, but let us, if you don't want to do that, if that's almost like the equivalent of like leaving a toothbrush or a bottle of scope on somebody's desk because they don't, we don't get into that. Then this is the equivalent of saying, or we're asking, email us, tell us who it is, and we'll send them, a book.
Great.
Not on your behalf, but we'll make sure a book arrives there. Because to answer your question, it's leaders, people in leadership functions, which I hope everybody who's listening to this, regardless of whether you're an individual contributor or you're a CEO of a company, goes, that's me. Like, I know every organization I've ever been a part of where I really cared about that organization, and certainly the ones that I've led, that I've cared about, I want everybody to be leading. Like, that's the best of all worlds, is where regardless of your title, your function, your pay scale, you consider yourself to be a leader. That's a bit of a Pollyanna statement, because we know that that's not how it is. It's not how it is in the culture of some of these businesses, because people are not actually heard. They're not seen. They're not heard. They're not respected. It's kind of old school word. I'm not a huge respect guy, but respect is as respect does. Love is as love does. When people care about you by how they treat you, whether they listen to you, whether they value your opinions. And a lot of people in the world of work don't feel valued. I mean, AI in particular, which I'm a huge proponent of AI. So, any college grads out there listening to this, you can boo me all you like, bury your head in the sand all you like, but you will find that this is going to change your life for the better. Like, it's going to be net positive for everybody. And like a lot of things in life that have been net positive, going back in history, and you can pick anything out. You want to start with the printing press. You want to go to the internet. You want to talk about the automobile. Like, pick any technological revolution and advancement. And yeah, there were a bunch of people that didn't love it. A lot of people that resisted it. Some people whose businesses and lives were changed, and initially not for the better. And yet net over time, that's what change always is. That's what the universe is. It's an expanding system, an organized whole, if you will, that is constantly evolving. If it's doing anything other than evolving, we're all in much bigger trouble than any of us could fathom, or I guess we could fathom it. But the opposite of change is entropy. Things must change or they stagnate and eventually die. So I get it. We're all kind of addicted to certainty and want to feel secure. It's the first script that's in our programming, internally, is to be safe, stay safe. That's it. And often that equates to staying the same, even when you're miserable, even when you're less than you can be, even if your life doesn't feel the way you want it to, or the situation you find yourself isn't optimal for you. We still stay the same, or we opt or default to the status quo because it's just safer to do that. So I get it. I got on a tangent there. But the idea here is that we should all be leaders. So the book is for everybody, in the sense that if you consider yourself to be a leader, then how do we lead through this period? And it is a very challenging period. Darwin, everybody's sort of familiar with the Darwin story, or I think, like, he goes to the Galapagos Islands in like 1835. He comes back, he's blown away, he starts writing, and then, all these years later, we're still repeating some of the things that came from him, like the survival of everybody could fill in the blank there, survival of the fittest, right? But that's not actually what he said. What he actually said about that was that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, and based on his research and his analysis, it's not the most intellectual, it's not the smartest of the species that survives. It's those that are best able to adapt to their changing environment. That is our legacy as a species. That's why we're here, because we've been able, to your point earlier, to change, to constantly change. So anytime you're in opposition to change, anytime you're resistant, pushing back on the wheel of change, not only are you going to get run over, so that we ought to know anyway, but you're getting in the way of an evolution that you couldn't stop anyway, but is necessary. It's absolutely necessary
Well,
for our growth. So
it takes some serious detective work though for someone inside a company. And this is what I'm trying to dissect this too at the same time here. Like if I'm because I don't think this can be, if reculture is what's needed, and I'd say 90% of the time it probably is, right? Like maybe even more than that, then the fantasy that this is the HR person's job or it's going to be solved when a CEO sends out a memo is a fallacy, right? But yet it culture feels like again, and you might feel differently about this. I'm curious to get your take. It's so overwhelming of a word if you really think about it. It's so daunting of an idea to shift culture. It feels like a top-down initiative. Like my brain immediately goes to, hey, this is what we do. How do I get to the right leader? The signals it sends, the right signals it sends that we're shifting here, that like that's what's needed. Now, if you would have called the book Reteam, right? Reteam, I love how you said everyone is, if you don't see yourself as a leader, that's a completely different question that needs to be explored for you, human, listening to this podcast, right? Because you have everything it takes to be a leader, and reculture can help you be a better leader. And it's how do you get more out of the people around you? If you have a boss, if you lead a team, your peers across, right? To me, the reteam, this is going to help you be a better team, right? That's going to have probably better conversations, healthier team. So, and again, I'm not sure if this is making sense with you, Adam. Like, I'm curious of like, is this landing or you're like, no, respectfully, Ryan, I disagree. Like, what's your take on this?
well, I feel like reculture is the big umbrella, and I'm not saying to reteam makes sense. There's so many words. Think about all the words that start with refocus, and
Totally.
restore, and reset, and regenerate, and recapitalize, and recalibrate. I mean, people are using, and recently I heard that people are refounding. There's the founding
Yeah.
folks, and now they're the refounding people, which is a word to kind of replace pivot in some respects. So it's funny. For me, this is now again going back to putting the cart and the horse in the right order. The culture that got people through the pandemic is not the culture that came out on the other side of it. And the world of work has changed dramatically. So we need to refocus on culture. And culture is everything. And maybe it was Peter Drucker. I think it was Peter Drucker. Correct me if I botched it, but culture eats strategy for breakfast kind of thing, right? That's it. And yet it's amorphous. You know it when you smell it, you know it when you taste it, you know it and see it, but you can't necessarily define it. But it is so palpably important to an organization that people feel connected, that they are able to work collaboratively, that they're able to trust one another. So the book is a leadership's guide to restoring connection, collaboration, and trust in a disconnected workplace. We are very disconnected and very distracted. And, maybe it was, I think T.S. Eliot said something. T.S. Eliot said something about distraction, like a long, long time ago, in connection with the world at that time, writing poetry and thinking about how something around like I'm being distracted by distraction from distraction or something, like it's the distractions are everywhere. And so we have to, the opportunity to create more connection with one another, to be able to collaborate more effectively, and to ultimately trust one another is part of the recipe for what culture is. If you're going to try to put do it in that, in a, a very contrived way. And that's, I think the book is the opposite of that. We speak to a lot of things. We meander through different subjects. My intention in the way the book was constructed was that you can start at the beginning and go to the end, and there's a continuity to it, because that's so important. That a big theme is the idea of things being cohesive, that there is a coherence to the book. But you can also just pick it up and read a chapter in the middle, or read the last chapter even, and be like, dope, that's amazing. That's what, or I'm fascinated by that, or I didn't know that, or we could begin working here now. I mean, I like to, I'm a bit anal in that regard. I was a lawyer for 20 years. So like I'm structured, and even without wanting to be sometimes. So I like to start at the beginning and go to the end. But honestly, you can open it up in the middle and be drawn into something. And I think that's what a book is for. That's what a podcast is for. That's what great speaking, keynote speaking is for, is to really draw people into something and have their attention and use it for some good purpose, right? We know that there's a lot of people that grab our attention for other reasons, which I don't want to even discuss or get into. But if you have that opportunity, that responsibility, that the privilege of grabbing and having somebody's attention for a moment, like leave them, have that experience be something that benefits or potentially benefits them, and in the best of all worlds will benefit other people that they are influencing. That's
Yeah,
my
this was-
highest aspiration for this book.
I think this is where our worlds collide too, because I fully acknowledge in a world where you feel, and I think many people still feel, overwhelmed for all the reasons we know, that when you decide that something has to change here, whether it's the team or the culture, you could exhaust yourself even thinking that way, but you need to do it, right? Like you need to go through that pain for the betterment of a more productive workforce, a more effective workforce, a happier workforce, all reasons that people would stay. So, not just giving them the courage, but giving them the tools to like go start. And I'm going off of I'm with you. Like I'm all for, me simple, me like linear, that's just my take. I like what is give the listener, like, here is the first step, the first tool, the place to start, that if you're going to go on this change journey, right, and you're going to take culture and actually do the re-component of it, where do you feel like someone who grabs the book, they've read the first chapter, what's the takeaway for them on where they start?
Well, it's like anything else. So all transformation, all change begins with awareness. So the first step in any process, when you're reevaluating or you're resetting something, or you're looking for the direction forward, you have to begin with some new awareness, and that's the place we start the book with I think a compelling story of being kind of lost, and I feel like that's a great place to begin, is when we feel that we've lost our center. I feel like in what we've done in the research of more than now 27,000 leaders globally. At the time of the writing of the book, we were in between 25 and 26,000 subjects that became part of the research for the book. We really found that people do feel lost. That people are not, they're not in sync with one another. They're not in a rhythm with one another, and with what is the trajectory of the organization that they're working for, which is a terrible sign for how that organization will navigate change in the future, will be able to handle the sort of really blastic changes, the VUCA disruptive stuff that's happening both politically and within the organizations, based on technology change, but based on a transformation right now, AI and beyond AI. If you get into it even further, things like OpenClaw, things like the fact that agentic services, agentic as a service, not software as a service, but agentic as a service, a gas, something that not everybody's even aware yet of what that change is going to mean to the world of work, to the work streams and workflows and structures of work. And all those things have to be examined. So throughout the book, there's a lot of stories of being lost, of organizations that have lost their way, and have led to certain tragic and not so tragic, but not great outcomes. So, for example, we talk about Boeing. We talk about the what culture meant and the loss of some cultural true north or alignment at that organization that literally led to death. So I think we posed the question in the book, and it may be even the chapter title, can culture crash a plane? And the answer is yes, it can. We examine the difference between how leaders, senior leaders, the most senior leaders, as well as those that are in various functions, have been successful at continue to cultivate the stuff, the piece of the relationship between people working together collaboratively, and where those or other organizations have allowed that to dissipate. We talk about where those challenges are faced by how work is actually organized. I mean, I think today one of the things that, because resilience is a through line in this book as well, one of the things that we examine is whether resilience is the primary responsibility of the worker or the person, the individual, or whether resilience is something that the organization, not like a parent, but in the parochial sense, or in a restrictive sense, but in the most loving and generous and inviting possible way to look at it, that the organization has some responsibility for how work is structured so that people are not more likely to be depleted. Because there's an element of this being a blame game, and where organizations, or the imperative is that if there's well-being at the workplace, it's because we've provided services, and now it's out of our hands, and we debunk that. We call bullshit on that, because the fact is that when people are unwell at work, which so many people today, and the signs are everywhere, and statistically we can point to it.
Is there a number? Like, do you have a guess on a number? What's the number?
On the number of
50%? Is it?
Oh no, it's much more than 50%. I can tell you that in our own statistics, I won't use Gallup or any of these other things. We're going to be publishing an academic paper, as well as I won't say who we're submitting the business paper to, but the academic paper is going to come out later this year, and we'll publish these findings. And what we see, interestingly enough, is that when it comes to personal well-being, the physical areas, it's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, and it's spirit, or alignment to purpose. There's a couple of really curious findings. The first one being that when push comes to shove, when stress levels are high, when people are feeling the pressure from work, they're always the ones that get pushed and shoved. They neglect and ignore themselves, and there are clear signs of the ways in which they ignore and neglect themselves that we identify. We also found that it, and this is really, I think, interesting data, that more than 80% of the people that we have surveyed, again, today about 27,000, more than 80% of those folks, when asked whether they're doing work that is in alignment with their core values and beliefs, so on the spirit quadrant, they say yes. They're doing work that aligns with their core values and beliefs. So I would say, to use some old language around this, they're in their right livelihood, which is brilliant. I mean, if you're a leader, you want that to be the case. If you're a parent, you'd want your kids to be doing work that feels like that. But the very next question that we ask, because this assessment is literally 16 questions, takes less than 3 minutes to participate in, which is why we really, I think, captured something quite amazing, like lightning in a bottle, really, with its simplicity and the honesty of the answers we've gotten. So the question is, you're in the right livelihood. And the next question is that we ask them, are there significant gaps between what they say is important and how they actually allocate their time and their energy and their resources? And that lights up red. So the first response to whether you're doing work that's in alignment with your values that lights up green. More than 80% of the folks are in that category. And then the very next question, the assessment
Perfect.
lights up red. And so the delta between those two is almost 30 points. The global mean on this assessment that we deploy, this resilient leader assessment, that particular tool, the global mean is 62. And then and then anybody's thinking, well, what, and is there a difference between the mean and the median? It's like 0.2 of a point. So it's like 62 out of 100. And also, just to quickly say this, what we're talking about when we think about how you reculture an organization so that you don't leave people behind, you reculture an organization intentionally so you have each other's backs. So you play for each other, as my team, the Knicks, were saying. They were using two things. They were saying we play for each other, and they were saying we have each other's backs, which is language we've been using for a while now. But what that looks like is that you don't leave anybody behind.
By the way, can I also tell you that since we're just going to tangent to the Knicks just for a second, I also, by the way, I really like how you use reculture in a statement. It feels organic. It feels true. The one guy I was most curious about with the Knicks was not Brunson. Sorry for those of you who are not sports fans, to stick with me here. It was Dolan. It was the owner. And I loved when he finally got the mic, he owned it. He's like, he actually said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took us so long to get here. And you talk about powerful words from a leader, because I'm like, there's no way. And I'm like, is he going to get booed when he gets the mic? Granted, he was 16 states away from New York. And he took the mic and said, I'm sorry it took us this long to get here. And he owned it. And I'm like, that is the perfect thing for a leader to say in that moment. I thought he absolutely nailed it in terms of like setting up. Now they did reculture in New York.
They did reculture. Yeah. Thanks to Jay Wright and blanking on the president's,
totally.
Leon Rose, right? And obviously, their new coach. And I was again, we're in the sports thing. I apologize too. But when they got rid of Thibodeau last year, I was really, and I'm going to say it even publicly now, I was completely wrong. I thought the decision was wrong at the time because he had brought them farther than they had been in more than 20 years. And yet the reculture was necessary because as you look back on it, what he wasn't doing and Mike Brown has done is allowing for more contribution. It's a perfect reculture example, actually. And unfortunately, at press time, like this book was solid and you couldn't change a word like 6 months ago. That's the way publishing is. But we get it, like with Pivot, we did a second edition of Pivot, which is so relevant right now. And it's in a paperback. And we were able to go back and not just, clean up some stuff, but we're also to create a prologue, epilogue thing where we could, bring it in. So maybe I'll get a chance to talk about the Knicks even more, when we do a second edition thing. But
that's your happy place. I fully expect on your podcast for you to have somebody on from the Knicks organization.
Well, I'm looking to get Jay Wright. And Jay Wright, for those who don't know, he was the coach of the Villanova, what's the Wildcats? Is that who they are? No. Yeah. Villanova. Yeah. And they won 2 national championships with him, or thereabouts. Brunson too. Anyway, the culture there was, and this is the more important than sports part of it, is that they were playing for each other. It was unselfish. It was egoless, even though we're all filled with ego. So the ego's there, but yet, can you subdue your own ego and your own, like quests for things? you're, like we're all like that. And yet, is there a greater purpose that we can all get behind? And that's what they did. And that's why they were able to beat teams that I think on paper, they weren't likely to beat. And they didn't just beat them. They beat them in ways that were painful to see if you were, the other team or the other team's supporters. So yeah, man, it's a great reculture example.
But also it helps me kind of go back to the top of the show, which is, in some ways, I mentioned word stock market, right? Like in some ways, the word culture, I feel like needs a reculture. Like culture itself needs a reculture. Like it needs to be it's undervalued. How is it possible? How is it possible that culture still is undervalued? And I get it if I'm a leader, especially at a public company, right? And I'm thinking about my day job. I'm thinking about I got a board meeting to get ready to, and I got to do this quarterly review, and I've got pressure in all directions. And is AI going to cut into my team, and how can I be more efficient? And am I that relevant? And all of the pressures that come with it. I'm not thinking about the journey components. I'm not thinking about this is not just my responsibility. Like the Knicks, it was a reculture on us together. It's all of us together. It's the team. So for anyone that's listening, again, I've got awareness. It starts with awareness. And I know collective resilience is a big part of what you do as well. And all right, it's not going to be easy. Like, let's lock arms. We got to be resilient. We'll do it together. That's a shared idea. But for anyone that's listening that maybe undervalues culture right now, and again, if someone's listening to the show and they're still 35 minutes in, they're into the topic. We don't need to convince them. We might need to give them ammunition to take to somebody else on the team or someone else. So what's the ammunition you want to give them to this? What could be more important than this conversation?
I don't think there's anything more important when it comes to something you spend so much of your waking, and not waking days and nights working on doing. Like, it's the work experience is so much a part of the passage of time that it's vitally important. You can't just leave it to chance, and it can't just be set to default. So again, to me, every leader has a place on the Knicks. To use that example again, there were a lot of people who aren't the person that holds the most valuable player trophy at the end, who contributed in material ways to that organization's winning and success in the end. And that is a great example of what it looks like when it works. And examples, every other team in the league that didn't hold the trophy at the end are a great example of what it looks like when it doesn't work as well. That's why I say the book is constructed into 3 components: work well together. So, and that doesn't just apply to work. It's a business book, but I feel like there's no question whether it's how do your relationships work well together? How do you work well together with other people? In other words, how do you work well in your family and your, most important relationship? It's not, it's not or dissimilar from the same concepts. So yeah, culture, I may borrow that, Ryan, because it needs its own reculture, because in some respects we're so tied to what is tangible that we can see. But here's the concept, and again, to get this, I think is vitally important, that to reculture is not an outside in game. I think a lot of us try to change our lives by changing something on the outside first. You don't like where you live, you move. You don't like the home you're in, you buy another one, or you try to buy another. Like you don't like how you look physically, you get some procedure, or you do something to change your physical look. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but that's not the solve. The solve is always an inside out game.
Totally.
And so culture is an inside out pursuit. You changing and transforming and creating something better in your life is inside out pursuit. So I think we have to recognize that that's the way this is going to work. That's the way it always works. And culture is like taste. How do you define taste? How do you compare taste, my taste in food, or my taste in clothing, or my taste in art, to your taste, Ryan? We may have similar tastes, but that's just, that's a happy accident, or whatever you want to call it. So culture is something that is defined at a base level. It's a pursuit that occurs in collaboration with other people who are vitally interested and are empowered and have agency to be a part of creating something that is lasting. And so, to me, if you ask who's primarily responsible for culture, I said everybody earlier. It's absolutely going to be a CEO in the end. If there's a failure of culture, it would have been a failure of the highest level of leadership at the Knicks if they didn't win yet again. And it is their success that they did win, but I think it's more often the case where we have to look at it the other way, where if we're not doing how, as well as we want to be, and we're not achieving the results we want, then we have to look to the top and say, all right, where is culture a part of the solution, or where has it been a part of the problem? It's a basic question that every leader
Yeah.
ought to be asking.
Well, I here are my big takeaways from this chat. I mean, one, and I this is why I love the podcast so much. I'm sure you feel the same way for yours. Like, you're just trying to make sense of it as you're going through it. And, maybe I'm going to get the words not perfectly right and we'll come back to it. But like, my big takeaway is that culture is an accountability job. That's all it is. It's like, you didn't just inherit a culture. It's something that you need to own. You need to own it. It needs to be actively renewed, and it's on you. And no one else is going to solve it or fix it or face it. Or you can't throw your hands up and go, well, that's the culture. And look, I'm working with a client right now that they have a culture. It's just not effective. And by the way, I've been talking about courage. I've shared that with leadership. Culture is very much like ideas. There are bad ideas and there are good ideas. There are bad cultures and there's good cultures. So I love this idea of like, hey, are you truly accountable for owning the culture? It's on you, leader. It really is, whether you inherited it or not. I love that. And to your point, where do you start? If you feel lost, if you feel you need the awareness, like, it starts there. And then are you setting up the journey with your team that it's going to be hard and it is going to take a collective resilience to do and change and shift. And I think your inside out job is also interesting.
So there's two things, and I know we're going to wrap up here, but just say two things, and we address this in the book. The first one is that a way to define culture, again, it's like taste, so I'm going to resist any formal definition of it, but we refer to it as collective resilience. That's what it looks like. Collective resilience is what culture is. And the second thing I'd say, and this is a bit of a call out to anybody listening that wants to start with what's our baseline, what's our analysis, again, what's the awareness that changes the game, because that awareness, once you have that awareness, nothing is ever the same. I mean, I think it was Marianne Williamson, among others, who've said that a mere change in consciousness is a miracle. It's a miracle to change your consciousness. So, I mean, so I say this.
By the way, you're much more positive example than the one I would have given, which is, if you can't spot the sucker, you are the sucker at the poker table. But how is it any different than that?
So the statement I'd say is this: every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And we say this, I say this in my keynotes, and we say this in the book. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if you look at whatever defines the results of your organization, a public company, a private company, a for-profit, not-for-profit, public service, not whatever, you look at those results, the system that you have is what produces those results. You want better results, you need to change the system. And culture, again, is it's overarching, it's an umbrella term for what the system is and what it produces. So again, using the example of the basketball, because it's so easy in sports to just say, did you win the gold medal? Did you win the Super Bowl? Did you win the championship, or didn't you? It's just that simple. And if you didn't, then you already have the answer to the question. You just now have to reverse engineer it. And the book, I think, is a great way to do that, because we get quite granular on what it looks like to reverse engineer the solutions.
That other thing that sticks with me, Adam, and I love the systems line. It's a great truth on, like, this is what you got. That's a reflection of the system. The other interesting journey takeaway for me is that well-being and performance are not opposites. Like, this inside out reality of, like, if you feel good on the inside, if the person next to you feels good and like you're co-creating together, well, of course, that's the 1 + 1 = 3. Like, what you kind of just shared, and even the whole next reculture, right? It's like the outcome that we all desire is some version of winning. I mean, that's the whole point of this is are we setting up the culture right? Who's holding that accountable? Who's setting the tone for that? What does that look like?
Are only
Well,
some
being in-
people winning, or does everybody get to win? I mean, this is the issue in our country. This is the issue in the world in many respects, that some people don't feel like they are set up to win. They don't have a chance to win. They don't feel like they are winning. And yet other people seemingly get to. And we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it's the same
Totally.
issue. So when you think about culture, you can think about culture in a petri dish. You can think about the culture of the country that we live in, or the system of government that we have. There's so many ways to look at what this is about. And again, I think when we're consciously creating it, when we're involved in a co-creation of that experience, we're only going to see something that is more a reflection of our true nature. And I'm an optimist, and I think, I have a lot of negative thoughts about people, like we all do, I guess, maybe, I don't know. But I ultimately land on, I love people. I love humanity. I
Yep.
think the best of humanity, because I do believe that it's no accident that we're here, and all those good things. But we need leadership, man, because if not led, our sort of more base instincts are toward greed and profiteering, and toward a lot of things that benefit a small group of people that are better able to take down, those rewards. But ultimately it doesn't even serve them. That's the irony. My dad, and maybe I'll leave you with this. My dad, the other night I had a chat with him late at night on Father's Day, and lucky enough for me, he's still around, and his mind is good and all that. He's 89. And he says to me, in the course of this conversation, he goes, you can't possess life. And I'm like, and then he went on to say something else, and he loved what he said after that. But I said to him, I go, Dad, I'm going to have it in my head now, like really clear, that the truth of that statement, that you can't possess life. Where is the effort to have everything, do everything, be everything, which is just so pervasive in our culture? A desire to possess life. I mean, that's, you going to take any of it with you, Ryan? Am I?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Not to my knowledge. Folks, pick up Reculture, Adam Markel's new book. I'm assuming it's everywhere. You'd expect the book to be, although Adam, I do want to hear, where do you want to send people to learn more about you and more about the book? Obviously we'll have this in the notes. And before I throw it to you on that, what sort of dawned on me is that we are all, whether corporate or at home, like even your conversation with your dad, like, and I think about my parents are 84 and 82, and I'm grateful that they're still here and coherent. I mean, families have recultures too, right? That's kind of where I'm like, what does our reculture look like? What needs to, and it's not about like, it's about bad. It's like, where do we want to improve, and where can we continue to grow as a unit? So whether it's at work or at home, what's the reculture for you? Go find that thing. Go pick up this book. Adam, where do you want to send people?
Well, if they're interested in the public speaking piece of it, the keynotes on topics like change and resilience and reculture working well together, adammarkel.com. That's a simple one. They want to look at our organizational work, the leadership trainings and things that we do to support organizations who are operationalizing these concepts. They can go to workwelllabs.com. And obviously you can get the
Thanks,
book.
man, for being here.
Get the book on Amazon.
What's it called? Is that new?
What's that?
Amazon? Never heard of it. Is it a newbie? All right, Dad.
Yeah, it's
Thanks,
a new
man.
one.
Great to see you as always, man. I've got copious notes here that I took. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.